Sherry Wilcox was denied a mammogram at 40 years old. 4 years later, she found a lump. It turned out to be breast cancer. Starting today, Ontario lowers the age for breast cancer screenings from 50 to 40. Sherry is cancer-free and an advocate with the nonprofit Dense Breast Canada and is in studio with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
What did your doctor tell you when you were 40 and you said, I wanted a mammogram?
Yeah, so I went in for kind of an annual physical and asked about whether a mammogram made sense at that age. And I was told that I was too young, that, consequently my breast would be too dense, and that a mammogram really wouldn't show anything. And that in Ontario, screening doesn't start until 50 anyways. And so, with that, I kind of parked the topic. I trusted my doctor.
Yeah. 4 years later.
So, yes, 4 years later, I, felt a small lump in my right breast, very close to my underarm, and, didn't know what it was. So made an in-person, it was kind of still in COVID. So made an in-person appointment to go see my doctor and had a physical exam. She suggested it was likely a benign fibroadenoma. But I did not want to leave without any form of imaging. So kept pushing for a mammogram. She ultimately sent me for an ultrasound. And when we got those results back, it showed there might be something slightly suspicious and to come back in another 16 weeks to confirm stability.
4 months.
4 months. So at that point, I said, that's nice, but I really want a mammogram as well. And so I had to push quite hard to get that mammogram then. So I got my mammogram. And I think it was within 3 or 4 days that I got a phone call from my family doctor telling me that it looked like breast cancer. And that's what the radiology report had said, that it was most definitely invasive ductal carcinoma. I remember her reading the words to me over the phone.
And then what?
So then began, a series of biopsies. Obviously, you need a biopsy to confirm the diagnosis. So I had, I think there were a total of 11 biopsies over the next few weeks. And then you have to learn about the type of cancer as well, because breast cancer treatments are very specific to the individual. So I was diagnosed with triple positive breast cancer, meaning that it was estrogen, progesterone, and HER2 positive. So it was very aggressive. We also learned at that point that it had already spread to the lymph nodes, meaning that, my treatments would kind of run the gamut. So neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which is chemotherapy before surgery. Then I had a bilateral mastectomy. Unfortunately, when, I had surgery, I didn't get what is known as PCR, or pathologically complete response. There was still a small residual amount of the disease left, which meant that I would have more chemo, but that was after radiation. So, it was well over a year and a half by the time all of the treatment was done.
And today?
So today, it's been my last surgery was this past spring. I had a few surgeries this year. I finished chemo last November. As far as I know, I'm cancer-free, trying to live my best life, take care of my kids. I work full-time, but there's always that fear of recurrence, right? So that's where I am today. You
have used this this experience to motivate change.
Yes.
And talk to me about that, because change is happening. The age is being lowered from 50 to 40. This is something that had already happened in the United States. It's now going to happen in Ontario and many other places. What difference is that going to make?
It's going to make a huge difference, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm not a physician, but not only do I think it will save lives, it will also change. The treatments that women will receive. I would imagine if women are diagnosed earlier, perhaps they won't need chemotherapy, perhaps they won't need radiation, perhaps they won't need bilateral mastectomies, and so their quality of life will be significantly better. If it's caught earlier, the treatments will be far less invasive and aggressive, and their quality of life will be better.
The argument, and I am very, very far from an expert on this, but the argument has been that with a denser breast, it is harder to detect, that there are the potential for false positives. What do you understand about the decision to move the age for self-referral for a mammogram to that earlier age? What implication that might have?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Obviously, younger women do typically have denser breasts, but people aren't going to know that until they see that on a mammogram, right? And then there are ways, other supplemental imaging. They can go for ultrasounds or MRIs, if necessitated. But in terms of imaging or screening for younger women, sure, it's less common for women in the age, in their 40s to have to have cancer, breast cancer rather. But when they do have it, it's typically more aggressive. Another thing is that I think there's a stat, it's 17% of breast cancers are diagnosed in women in their 40s. So it's pretty common. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is that I think it's about 85% of cases, there's no family history. So, a lot of people think, they should only have screening if there's family history, but it's 85%. That's pretty high. Mm-hmm. And for younger women, it's typically more aggressive. And also for non-white women, the peak incidence is earlier. I think it's in the 40s rather than in the 50s and upwards. So this will catch a lot of more aggressive earlier cancers in women in their 40s and in many visible minorities.
What do you say to a woman who is in a position to get a mammogram now because of the age change, but is scared of the screening process?
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about benefits and harms. People, including our task force, the Canadian task force, talk about the harms of screening and the worry that people have when they go for a mammogram. So I've had a mammogram, and it's relatively quick and relatively painless, especially compared to chemotherapy, mastectomies, radiation. So I think it's well worth it. And I would encourage any women in their 40s who are listening, or anyone else, to tell women that they know in their 40s to go and get screened. I think we really need to get the message out that this is important and women need to take care of themselves.
Sherry, thank you very much for coming in, telling us your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And for the work that you've done since. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Sherry Wilcox is a breast cancer survivor and an advocate now with the nonprofit Dense Breasts Canada.